I'm delighted to be joined by the Chief Executive of Leeds City Council, Tom Riordan. Tom, welcome to the Downtown Den.
Hi, Frank. Hi, everybody. Great to see you.
Yeah, well, it's we're getting used to these virtual events now, but it's still quite a strange way of working. And as I'm speaking, I can see more people joining. So we'll crack on with the questions, because I know we've only got you for 45 minutes today, and we've had an awful lot of the audience sending questions in. I want to get through as many as them as well. The first thing I want to talk to you about, Tom, is that just before the lockdown, the budget announcement was made, included, of course, a devolution deal for West Yorkshire, which I know you and your colleagues have been working really hard on for a number of years now, trying to get something in place. What will that deal look like, Tom?
So it's one of the best deals that's been negotiated, actually, Frank, and we're really delighted with it. And we just got it under the wire. We'd have been so frustrated, I think, if we'd have spent 5 years and then just as we were about to get the thing signed, the COVID comes along, a bit like Leeds United getting promoted, I guess. It's an excellent deal. It's very very good gain share, 38 million. I think it's the best deal that's been negotiated over a 30-year period. Lots of the powers that Greater Manchester have successfully got together over the years, we have exactly the same powers on the same basis, particularly around jobs and investment, around transport, particularly buses, which was a big priority for our political leaders. The skills and education agenda, really, really important, and that's going to be critical in the next phase, I've got to say. And basically trying to integrate a lot of things around an infrastructure. I'd call it an infrastructure plan approach, rather than a sort of spatial planning approach, although some people would call it that. It's not the exact geography that we would have loved, because of the Leeds economy does struggle these two-tier areas. So wherever that's happened around the country, that's been a challenge. But we have the core geography of West Yorkshire. We have the core city of Leeds at the heart of it. The deal will be out to consultation shortly. It will be consulted over the summer, and we are confident, despite COVID, that we can still aim for a May 2021 election of a mayor. The combined authority will be slotted, underneath the mayor and with the mayor. It will include, unlike other areas, cross-party representation on that combined authority, which for our part of the world I think is important, because it does tend to change over the years, and so I think having buy-in across parties makes it quite sustainable going forward. Really delighted to get it over the line. It's been a bit of a distraction for us, as you know, without having it. Even though Leeds has done really well, we did really think that we needed the extra resources in particular, and and we're delighted to get it sorted, and I look forward to getting it through and getting a mayor elected and working with them, as one of the key representatives of the partnership.
You mentioned the fact, Tom, that there will be some additional resources coming along with the deal, of course, but equally important is those responsibilities. And I suppose you've been looking at the other devolved areas. Listen, I know that you work really well in collaboration with your colleagues in West Yorkshire anyway, but that structure has given places like Greater Manchester, Liverpool City region, and elsewhere an opportunity to get a grip of some of these strategic challenges during the crisis, perhaps a little earlier than they would have done otherwise. So it's not just about the money, this, Tom, is it? It is about getting those extra responsibilities in place so that West Yorkshire can start to make decisions for its own future.
Yeah, and I think the closer you can put decision making to the people it affects, And the more you can involve people who know their places, the better decisions you make. That's a principle that I've learned over the years, having worked internationally, nationally, regionally, and now locally. And I think this gives us a tremendous opportunity to solidify and formalise a lot of the joint working that we, as you say, we do very effectively already, and we mirror, the collaborations that happen across other areas like GM and Liverpool. But it gives us that. The soft power element is the important thing, I think, having looked at, what's happened over the last few years. Despite our best efforts, I think people do look towards a mayoral figure to speak at times for an area on that national stage. We have some brilliant leaders like Judith, in Leeds, that actually do that job really well. And I think the important thing for our part of the world is that it is collaborative, and we're quite a federal geography in this part of the world. We have very big, Bradford's a huge city in its own right, right next door to Leeds. So, we have these big cities in their own right, and big places right next to each other. So I think a collaborative team approach is absolutely what we need, and I think we can use it to come out of recovery really effectively. And that work has started, but the challenges that are going to hit us with the the need for us to bounce back once we get COVID under control, and we hopefully have a vaccine or a treatment, once we get the ability to get people back into work, once the inevitable happens and we get unemployment rising, that's going to be the core agenda, I think, for this new mayor and the new body.
You talk about those future challenges, Tom, and I know that you'll have already been thinking about recovery plans. And of course, Leeds will have been hit like every other core city in terms of, as you say, unemployment, challenges to business. But I think if you were to go into a crisis having a backdrop of positive news, then Leeds has certainly got that. You've got Channel 4 on its way, of course, which was a fabulous success for the city. You've then, hopefully, and you've referenced this briefly in your open remarks there, Leeds United getting promoted. And how often have we talked about the difference a Premier League club would make to the city? And then, of course, on top of that, the devolution deal. So you're attacking this recovery plan in a place of relative strength, despite, as I say, the difficulties that clearly everybody has to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, Leeds was, if you look at the stats for just before we entered this period, we had some of the highest investment levels that we've ever had, and they, position us very well relative to any other city, not just in this country but in Europe. And I think the fundamentals of the Leeds economy and the fundamentals of the way the city is run is why people want to come. And they love what we've done with the city centre, in terms of that balance we've struck between getting the retail core right, but getting a new business district built, and not doing things in a way that favours the car, but actually tries to really think about people and the way that we move around the place. And I think it sets us up pretty well, I think, for the next phase, where we've got all these new challenges about maybe fewer people commuting in at the same time, the carbon agenda, the community-based approach that we've taken. So that's what Channel 4 were attracted by, and that's what the investors that are coming into Leeds still are attracted by. And the things we've lacked have been the things that you've mentioned. We've been almost held back by not getting the devolution deal sorted and not having the Premiership football team, because we're in a global economy. The thing that stands out above all in the UK is Premiership football. However much people who don't like football would get frustrated by that, that's what people, when you go around the world and you talk to them about where do you come from, that's probably the first thing they'll mention, the football team. I can't set any sort of hexes on the promotion campaign, I'll get murdered by 800,000 people. But keep saying to them when they want. Some of people were saying, let's just take the points per game thing and get promoted. I think it is a better way to do it, and I'm really, they've got a great team and a great setup. And Bielsa is, I'm a Borough fan, so I have a different challenge, wanting to avoid relegation. But I think for Leeds, the fit between Bielsa and the club and the city is perfect, because he's a bit, there's an otherness about it. There's an independence. There's a passion, and there's a genuine innovation about what he does. And I think that really sums up the city. It's great, a great opportunity, and let's hope they make it.
Yeah, and with all those three things in place, Tom, as you do turn your attention to that recovery plan, the other area, of course, that Leeds have been promoting heavily for a number of years now has been health and science. So again, you can't imagine that that's not going to be an important sector moving forward. And of course, you've invested heavily in digital infrastructure and started to, I think, generate a really good digital community in the city as well. So, as I say, listen, we can look at this thing glass half empty if we want, but I would suggest that there's some really exciting opportunities for Leeds moving forward, despite what's happened over the past few months.
Yeah, completely. And I think we have all the people in place in key positions in the business community and in the council, and with devolution coming, we've got some fantastic people in our health system, like Julian Hartley at the hospital, and the sort of the university under the leadership of Alan Langlands has been, because of his history in the NHS, has been fantastic, and it's put us in a really good place. And the next set of people who are going to come in the university and in that health sector, building on the digital base that we've got, is just incredibly exciting. I've been talking to an investor actually that I can't give any detail about, but it's one of the most exciting projects I think I've ever seen in terms of transformation of how we experience culture, and it links into the digital capability we've got, how we've stood up for culture in Leeds and sort of protected it over the years. And we've got amazing people like James Bryan at the Playhouse, and Opera North, Northern Ballet, as well as really good micro-cultural organisations. And that's what bubbles away and makes the city tick. And I think we've managed to capture that in the digital sector in the way that you say, with the work Stuart Clark and others have done with the digital festival, and the strength that's coming out of that sector. If you needed to say, what are you going to need coming out of COVID in this next phase, I think Leeds has all the fundamentals that you'd want in a city, and I'm always optimistic about and glass half full. You can go two ways with this. You can be defeatist and think that it's it's going to go on forever and it's going to set us back, or you can just say, these things happen once every 100 years. It happens to have happened now, and we've got to fight back and do it. The only way we'll do it is the collaborative team ethic that we have in the city. It's great to see so many people on the call. All of them will have ideas about what we should do next, and we want to hear them. And they're going to be very much part of what we do, because that's the way we work. And digital, health, tech, infrastructure, big priorities for us.
And when you mention collaboration, Tom, obviously we start with West Yorkshire, but then you've been a big advocate of the Northern Powerhouse piece, and I know Leeds have been hugely involved in terms of the progress of the activity that's taken place under the umbrella of that particular brand. I think it'd be fair to say that it's been dominated by transport and infrastructure conversations. Sure, that'll move on as things develop. But equally, if we look at what the government have had to do in terms of supporting business through this crisis and supporting citizens through this crisis, whatever you say about their approach to the health side of this crisis, the fact is, I think the vast majority of people would acknowledge Rishi Sunak has done a terrific job in terms of coming up with an awful lot of cash to end up with a safety net of sorts for business. That then leaves the question of how much money will be left in the pot for those big schemes that, again, people like you and I have been campaigning for and arguing for many years now. Do you get any sense, Tom, of a lack of appetite for things like HS2 or Northern Powerhouse Rail? Or do you think, forgive the pun, but do you think those things are still on track?
Yeah, no, I do think they're on track, actually. I think the so-called levelling up agenda, I think, is still a central part of what the government intend to do. I think, people will be watching to see whether they can follow through on that. And I think those sort of projects are the ones that people will judge them by. And because of that, I think they probably will. They will continue. I think there's going to be huge challenges, obviously, with the situation of the public finances that's happened and is happening during this period. But I think that it's a reset point, isn't it? I do think there's some quite fundamental principles at the heart of what's happened, where I think people may change their views a bit. I think people's appreciation of the low-paid workers and the role that they play in keeping the country running. The idea that Whitehall runs the country is always one that's made me chuckle, because people go on holiday in Whitehall for August and the country still runs. The people who run the country are actually not people like me. It's people who you've seen keeping the supermarkets going and keeping the NHS and social care going and collecting your bins. And I hope there's going to be a recognition from across the sectors that actually having a more equal approach to, what people get paid and what they put, themselves forward for is important, not just from, a sort of traditional social justice perspective, but actually in terms of the society we want. Equally, I think, I think there's a lot of people who have never had to encounter a safety net, who have had to do so during this period. And I hope in doing this, there will be people who recognise that actually, having a safety net in place in the country is important. Not just, as I say, in the sort of traditional, social justice type of lens, but also, but in terms of making, this can happen to anyone, and there's got to be a shared approach to. I sound like one of these, politicians now, but I think there is going to be I think business is going to have to think about the fact that there's been an awful lot of taxpayers' money spent to keep them going. So in the next phase, they're going to have to take the share in paying that, help pay that back. I think what we should do is recognise that this is a once in a lifetime event that you should pay back in a once in a lifetime, across that lifetime. So I think there is a need to. I don't think we should knee-jerk back to. We've got to eliminate all this we've spent in 3 years, because we'll bankrupt everybody then. And we'll be back to austerity and it'll be a nightmare. But I think we do need to recognise we need a long-term sort of plan to get the public finances back. But it should be long-term, because that's it's like a war or a pandemic like this. You pay it back over a long period of time.
Yeah, it won't have escaped your notice, Tom, that whilst Cobra have its conversations, the Mayor of London takes his seat at those meetings. And the regions, of course, don't have representation. Now, I know you have other channels of communication into Whitehall, and I'm sure, in fact, I know as well that people like Steve Rotherham, Andy Byrne, I'm sure people from Yorkshire have direct communication into the Prime Minister's office. But it does strike me that it demonstrates still a necessary and important need for the North to argue with one voice at times. We know that there's going to be competition occasionally for investment, but I think more important going forward will be that collaborative piece. And this is why I think, whether we call it Northern Powerhouse or whatever we call it, the fact is that the North does need to have a voice, a strong voice, to say that we need to be playing a huge part in this recovery process. I was a bit disappointed that the Prime Minister didn't concede to allowing a regional voice in those conversations. But going forward, we do need that bigger say, I think, Tom.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think I don't think the North's going to. I don't think you can turn back the clock now. I think we're now, in a groove whereby we all will work together, and I think that's got to be for the good of the whole of the North. And I think we need to make sure that we have both sides of the Pennines, heard together. And the North East sometimes feels a bit, as the the sort of add-on sometimes. So we've got to think about that. But when you put the whole thing together, we're a formidable bunch actually, and we've got some really talented people, and we know that with more ability to shape our own destiny, we do a better job. So I think there's a real common cause between Andy and Steve and people like Judith and Nick Forbes and Julie Dorr in Sheffield, and I think we've got to work together and make sure that Whitehall can't ignore us. I do think this crisis has shown, the role I've been given, they do recognise that they do need more voices who know what's happening on the ground and know the places, and that's what the people that you've mentioned can give. And I don't think the command and control system, the highly centralised system, is sustainable. And I think this is, again, if this is a watershed moment, then that should be in the list of things that we do differently and that we change. And I'll be advocating that extremely strongly, continuing to do that alongside others, the political leaders as well. And I know other chief execs like Joanne and Tony and others will do too.
And I think a great phrase that Roger Marsh used when I spoke to him recently was that North needs to be seen as part of the solution, not perhaps the problem that it's been seen as in the past by other governments. And I think that's a great phrase to go into conversations in the future in a positive fashion, Tom, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and I think it's backing that up with substance of what we mean as well. That's what are the things that we want to change. That is the infrastructure point. The skills challenge for us is going to be we're in the position that we were in now with this recession that's coming, probably akin to the 80s is probably the nearest that we've got to, what might happen next. And we know what happened to a sort of generation of young people then. And I think that's what we've got to avoid now. And I think a very active, empowered North working on that agenda of, right, for people who are coming out of school and college and university, we're here for you, and we're going to get you into work, and we're going to train you up, and we're going to, get you connected to the opportunities that we know you can take. I think a massive push around that for the North, to me, alongside the infrastructure point, would be the sort of things that we should be going for. I don't think we should be timid, and I don't think we should be creating a long list. I think we need 2 or 3 things, and it's probably infrastructure, skills, and carbon. The climate change agenda that we could really go for. And genuinely, I think we could say, they passed the test that you just asked. Roger's point, in all 3 of those, if we were given what we're requesting, and we controlled it rather than Whitehall, we would be able to give more than enough back to the Exchequer and create that economic growth that Jim O'Neill's talked about before. that could make a huge difference across the whole of the north, not just one part. So yeah, I think I think we've got to mobilise.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're good at doing that. So I'm sure you'll be playing a leading role. Listen, we've been inundated with questions this morning. We're not going to be able to get through all of them, but we'll try and get through as many as we can. And I'm going to start with a question from Paula Grizzard from She Business. And she's asking, what changes will the council and partners be making to economic plans as a result of the changes to the wider economy due to the lockdown?
So I think you'll have seen already what we're doing about cycling and walking and getting about in the city. We're making changes that I think are gonna endure, hopefully, and we've started initiatives around car-free school drop-offs, and I think a whole different way of thinking about how we get people around the city is going to be required. I think we are going to have to work, particularly in the short term, with businesses and large employers to work to see how we can get people commuting in and out of the city in a slightly different way, so that we don't have the high peaks to the commuting patterns. And I've talked to the CEOs of Asda and Direct Line and others, the hospital, the universities. Everybody's up for that. I think there's a really exciting agenda about how we strike more of a balance between having to, rush into work every morning at a certain time and rush back every night at a certain time, and do it all at the same time together on the same days. I think we should be thinking really differently about more of a balance. So you're not working from home all the time, because that's not good for your mental health. But equally, you don't have to be in the office all the time. And let's do what's right for our place. And I think there's a great opportunity there. I think there's the issue about the low-paid workers and the respect for people feeling fully part of what we're trying to achieve. I think I tweeted yesterday about the BAME agenda and George Floyd. I think we ignore these issues at our peril, I think, thinking that it's just a matter for the US. I think I don't mean in terms of the way that our police forces operate. I mean more in terms of the sense of disenfranchisement that sometimes people feel from certain communities. And the COVID effect has been disproportionate on some communities. And I think we've got to really think about that hard and think about how we're going to tackle that with them and bring them along and be a city that stands for diversity and follows that through in everything that we do. So they're the sort of things that I think we need to do, as well as the things we were doing really well before. So not forgetting to do, there's a big part of this, which is it won't change everything. It'll change a lot of things, but it won't change everything. And the things we were doing really well, we've got to stick with.
Thanks, Tom. An interesting question here from Sarah Worthington from Riordan Planning and Design. I'm interested in understanding where the Leeds Bradford Airport expansion plans come into this. Would it be more sensible to relocate the whole airport to the south so that access is easier from the M62, M1? She makes a couple of other points, but you get the gist, Tom. And again, I know that there's been some conversations, because the airport, we would all concede, isn't in the best location at the moment. But it's going to be a tough one, given that resources are limited.
Yeah, it is where it is because of the war, actually, and been difficult to find at times. So yeah, no, look, I've been asked this question before. Until we get to the point where you've got a proposition, an owner that wants to move, a government that wants to move it, and the investment to back it up, then I think it's an interesting question, but it's not one that we should spend too much time on now until those things are in place. If those things were in place, then certainly the logic of it makes sense, but they aren't. So as long as they aren't, we should go for what we've got now. And I think that there will still people will still want to travel by air going forward. I understand the climate emergency agenda, and I totally respect the people who are lobbying on, you know, to say that, you know, we shouldn't be expanding airports. Actually, the change that's been proposed by the airport, I think, is as much about its configuration and how easy it is to get through it and how efficient it is. And they do have plans for carbon offset. And, you know, what I wouldn't want to do is to, you know, disadvantage the poorest people in the city and the region by closing an airport like that, because they'd end up having to travel further and pay more to go on holiday. So I think people will still want to fly, even if it will be maybe less than before. And we will ask more serious questions about why we're flying and how many times we're doing it. I still think it's something that needs to be, you know, considered moving forward. But that's obviously a planning decision that's not in my hands. But I think that's what I would say about the general position of the airport.
Okay, thanks, Tom. There's a question here from Richard Bamford of CBRE. How will the city cope with the increased demand for car parking as people initially seek to avoid the use of public transport as they return to the office environment? Really important point, and a big challenge, I think, for us all, isn't it? If we are trying to get people out of cars, then we are going to start to have those conversations about different times of coming in and out of work, all those things that you've touched on earlier. But certainly in the first instance, Tom, there will be that tendency for people to want the privacy and the relative safety of travelling in their own motor vehicles. So car parking, not going to be an issue in Leeds, do you think?
I think, I mean, it is one of those sort of counterintuitive things when we're all wanting to get more people, you know, moving away from the car. As you say, I think intuitively, I think people will want that sort of safety. I think, given what I understand from the plans of, you know, employers and how we're going to deal with this period next, I don't see it being an immediate issue, but I may be wrong and that may change. But, you know, if we get, I think there will still be quite a significant amount of working from home that will endure through this, because I think a lot of businesses and organisations have seen that actually, do they really need, you know, that many people in the office all the time? And if it can help their own circumstances and their mental health and everything else, to their quality of life, to have more of a balance, then I think that will happen. So I think there'll be a sort of offset there that will hopefully balance out a bit. When we get the other side and we have a vaccine and, you know, treatments, and we're hopefully through this, it will be, I think that's probably when it may become more of an issue. But if COVID's dealt with then hopefully we'll be able to strike that balance that I was talking about before.
I think is that one of the other questions in here, I can't quite find it on the list, but guy who was saying, you know, it's great when you think about cycling in this, not today, but in the weather that we've been enjoying. But it is a bit different, isn't it? A wet and windy day in Manchester, Leeds or Liverpool doesn't sound much fun getting on your bike and cycling into work. So, you know, do you think that we are over egging this idea that, you know, everybody's going to be looking for alternative modes of transport? I think it is important to recognise that the country, generally speaking, does not lend itself easily to those alternative modes. And again, I'd have to say, without being too unkind to some of my colleagues, I don't think some of them could get on a bike, never mind ride one. So there are those, you know, I'm talking about, Tom. Yes. So there are those challenges, aren't there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's right, and but I, you know, I think it's all about balance. I don't think there's, you know, it's completely black and white, these issues. I think we've got to make it easier for people to cycle and walk if they can and if they want to. But equally, we've got to recognise that a lot of people, you know, need access to public transport. And to me, the biggest difference we could make is to is to lose the 2 spikes a day in in numbers. I think if we can try and level off the times and the days that people travel in and out, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that could make a difference. I was talking to Roger Burnley from Asda about it, and we were reflecting that we both probably did want to move to that more balanced approach, but what we didn't want to have was a lot of people's instinct, if they're going to work, say, 2 days a week from home, is I've got to be in on a Monday morning because everyone's going to be there. And actually what we've learned from this is that you don't need to be in on a Monday morning. You can do this and probably connect much better and much more efficiently with lots more people. So I do think that, we were saying before that the Zoom feels like a prison some days to me, because I'm in so many blooming calls, but actually it's quite transformational in the way that you can convene people and the way that you can get messages out to people that just wouldn't have been even conceivable before this crisis. So let's take the good bits of it and recognise that, as I said before, some things won't change. And it's raining today, and I think we've forgotten what the rain was like, haven't we? And queuing outside to get into a shop in the rain in the winter is very different from doing so on a nice sunny day or spring day.
Yeah. Okay. The last question, I think, from our audience today that I'm going to ask, and this is from Rachel Mather from Mather Limited, bid management and research consultants. How do you intend to proceed with linking investment in infrastructure and taking into consideration urban regeneration and the circular economy with connecting local people with opportunities? Also, as a small sole trader, both living and working in the city, how will the devolution of centralised funds ensure that small businesses can maximise their chance of success at the most challenging of times? A couple of great points there from Rachel. Matching the new opportunities with local people's skills. And also, I think, again, as I've referenced, Rishi Sunak as the Chancellor has done a great job. But a lot of people, Rachel may be one of them, have fallen through the net of that business support. And I know, Tom, that you'd be as keen as anyone to ensure that those micro businesses are supported over the next year or so to ensure that they can come out of this crisis as strong as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Frank, and great questions from Rachel. I think on the circular economy and the link to people, I think that's just the sort of agenda that we've got to be backing in this next phase. And I think the LEP has a really important role to do that, and I think the council will too. And I think the carbon agenda and the healthcare agenda and the work we've done, some brilliant work with MIT in Boston, and we're working with. I'm part of a cohort of people who've been working with cities from around the world, looking at what your economy is really good at, where you've got real innovation expertise that's world class and world leading. We've been working with Oslo and central Denmark and Sydney, and it's been fascinating. Monterey, Kentucky. It's been fascinating when you get people reflecting back on your story. And one of the things we've had back from that group is to say what a massive opportunity that, as you said before, Frank, the healthcare agenda is for us. Having the NHS based in Leeds, is a big advantage for us. And I think linking that and the circular economy, almost Leeds could be the place in the world that solves some of the big societal challenges with that combination of tech and healthcare and carbon, climate emergency that we've got, and actually coming on to the second question, the people who can do that are not often the big massive businesses. It's the agile, smaller, entrepreneurs. And one thing that we really want to get out of that MIT program is to back entrepreneurs and put them at the heart of what we do. And it's been really interesting learning for me. I've done economic development for too long now in my career, some would say. But one of the things it's taught me is that, you know, we often think in generic policy ways about how we're going to do things, but actually the best way to think about it is through the eyes of the business first, and keep looping back to that when you're trying to devise programs and ways of working. And so it's something that we're going to try very hard to make sure that we do going forward. We've got 129 million pounds out to over 11,000 businesses over the last few weeks, and you know, we have tried desperately to you know, make sure that we've extended that support as far as we can possibly push it, given the rules that we've been given. And so we've supported an awful lot of businesses. We've got the fund that's just launched recently as well for people to have a look at on the website. So yeah, there's lots that we've done, but much more to do. And I think getting Leeds as the place you want to be if you're an entrepreneur and you want to solve one of these big problems in the world is really our new vision coming out of that MIT work for that you know, sole trade or entrepreneurial agenda. Really exciting. Linking it into the university, linking it into the NHS, you know, it's linking it into the tech sector is one of the big opportunities.
Yeah. Tom, it's been great to see you this morning. And final point from me really is to see when you're planning on getting your colleagues at the City Council going back into work, into some numbers. I think you were saying offline July is looking the likely timescale for that. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I hope that we'll continue to see infection rates reduce in Leeds and around the country. That isn't, you know, it's not completely uniform across the country just yet. Leeds is actually, as a city, is looking pretty good compared to some other parts of the north. But I think we need June to. I mean, I've been in this work. It's been incredible pressure and challenge, because it's sort of the most important thing that for the country to get right. If we can get this test and trace and containing outbreaks thing right, then it lets us have a sort of a new normal through this next period before a vaccine or a treatment's found. But I think getting things down into July so that we can be getting infection rates much lower will allow us to, I think, people more confidence to come back into work and into the city centre, and but probably not on the numbers they've been before, as we, you know, as the lockdown eases, but to a, you know, hopefully a sustainable level. And as Leeds City Council will be doing the same. We won't be rushing everyone back. It'll probably be, you know, start with say 20% of people in the office because of social distancing. And I've heard from the conversations I've had with others, that's broadly, I think, what people will be looking at as well. And then some staggering of working patterns so that it's not the same people all the time, but you've got, you know, different groups of people coming in at different times of the week, and keeping them in groups as well is a sensible bit of resilience to do as well. So the same groups tend to work together, and they're not all of a team, you know, it's maybe half of a team. So that they're the sort of things that I think we're moving towards. And through June is a period where I think we've just got to keep going, of, you know, keep the main lockdown going, but then after that we can move to a hopefully a more sustainable way of working.
Great. Tom, as I say, thanks for joining us. It's been great to hear from you. Delighted the devolution deal's finally gone through, because I know how hard you've worked on that over the years. And hopefully we'll see you at a live event in the not too distant future, mate. Yeah, absolutely. It'd be great to see you all. And thanks for all the support Downtown's given us over the years on devolution as well. You've been a really important voice for us and very influential. So thanks to you, Frank, and your members for what you've done for us. No, lovely. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks
Have a
a lot.
great day. See you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.